We thank Hashem that we're able to learn every day. This chas of learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Everyone that needs her for Shlema should have, and brethren in Ukraine should be safe.
Amen.
Okay, we're going to start today Daf Chaf Aleph, Chagigah Daf Chaf Aleph, right after the Mishnah. The Mishnah made differences between items that are kodesh, that means used for sacrificial food, and items that are truma. That means that it's given to the Kohen. It's not sacrificial food. We said, of course, that the sacrificial food was more strict. So how many items did we have that were more strict with sacrificial food, kodesh, than truma? So we listed out in the Mishnah 11 differences. The Gemara asks, right away it starts off, Kodesh my time alai. What's the difference by kodesh? The first item, the first scenario, we said that when it comes to truma, you're allowed to put inside a vessel other vessels and put them both in the mikveh, put the whole thing in the mikveh, vessels inside vessels, and immerse the whole thing. When it came to kodesh, no, you had to immerse them separately. You couldn't immerse a vessel inside a vessel. What's the difference? Amar Rabbi Ila. Rabbi Ila says, "Mipnei shekvedi shel keli chaitzitz." Says the issue over here is that the weight of the inner vessel is going to be a chatzitza, will interpose between the water and the vessel, because it's weighing down, the water won't get underneath, it won't get inside. It's called a chatzitza. So the Gemara says, "V'amida seifa misham chatzitza, reish alav misham chatzitza." The problem is that we have another discussion later in the Mishnah about if you have to take apart a vessel, untie it before you tovel it. And we said for kodesh, yes, and for truma, you don't have to take it apart and untie it. You can actually tie it together and immerse the whole thing together. Now, the significance of that was, do we say that it's considered a chatzitza? Do we say it's not considered a chatzitza? We're more strict about kodesh than we are for truma. So the problem is that later in the Mishnah, we have a discussion about chatzitza being more strict for kodesh than for truma. Now you're telling me that the first case of the Mishnah is also chatzitza, and that we're more strict. Turns out it's the same thing. So, mida seifa misham chatzitza, because later on in the Mishnah, turns out that that's case number 6. I'm sorry, case number 5 in the Mishnah. Case number 5 in the Mishnah is about chatzitza. Then the reish is probably not about chatzitza. What's Rabbi Ila telling me? That the reason why you can't put a keli inside a keli and tovel them both together is because of a chatzitza issue. It says the Ketani Seifa, because later on it says in the Mishnah, the way of kodesh is not the way of truma. Sheba kodesh, when it comes to sacrificial foods and those utensils, matir, you have to untie, you mangiv, you have to dry, you matbil, and then you put it in the mikveh. And after it comes out of the mikveh, that's when you can tie it back together. If it's a type of vessel that's held together with ropes. When it comes to truma, you can actually tie it together before you start the immersion process and immerse it already tied together. So you see, the concept of chatzitza being more strict for kodesh, it's said in case number 5. Why are you telling it to me already in case number 1? According to this, we're saying it's the same concept. The Gemara answers, Reisha v'seifa misham chatzitza u'tzricha. Actually, they're both because of chatzitza. But each one has its own logic to be different than the other one. So we need both to have both cases. Why is it necessary to have both cases? The Yashmin and Reisha, if it would only tell me the first case, which is talking about putting one vessel inside another vessel and immersing it in the mikveh, Hava Amina, I would have said, what's the reason why you can't do that for sacrificial food vessels? Mishum kvedesh al keli dika, because the vessel has a weight and it's going to weigh down on the vessel that's the larger one that's surrounding it, and it's not going to allow the water to get in between. It will interpose, be a chatzitza. Aval seifa, the leka kvedi shel keli. But in the second case, over there, we didn't have the weight of a vessel. It was just a rope that was tying one to the other. Maybe that's not considered a chatzitza. You don't have the weight. We're on 21a. It's a small daf. Okay, so I could have said that maybe this issue is more by the first case, putting a vessel inside a vessel, than it would be by the second case, which is tying it together with ropes. And if it would only tell me the case about putting it together with ropes, that's an issue for kodesh, but not for truma. I could have said, what's the reason why you can't do this for food that belongs to a sacrifice? Mishum de kitra b'maya ahaduki mehadek. You can just imagine this. When it comes to a knot that gets wet, it gets worse. It gets much tighter. A knot that gets wet is very hard to take because it expands together. You can't get it out. So I could say that would be a real issue of chatzitza. Aval reisha. But in the first case of the Mishnah, where I have one vessel that's inside another vessel and it's weighing down, it says, well, it's not such an issue because the maya akfuyi makfale lamana, the water will cause the inner vessel to float, and it won't be a chatzitza. So I would have said that that's not a real issue. The weight of the, I guess it depends on the material, if it's going to float or if it's going to weigh down. But we say, it won't be an issue. So tzricha, so we need both cases. So what Rav Ila just did is he told us that the reason for the not allowing one vessel to be inside another vessel is because of chatzitza. So why do I need two cases of chatzitza? Because each case I could have thought maybe would be different. Okay. Now the Gemara says, Rav Ila letamei. Rav Ila actually follows another statement that he says. Rav Ila says in the name of Rab Chanina, Rab Chanina bar Papa. Says the name of Rab Chanina bar Papa. Eser Mailas Shanakan. We have 10 levels here. The truth is we have 11. But Rav Ila says in the name of Rab Chanina bar Papa, we have 10. What happened to the 11th? He said it's the same thing. Two cases of chatzitza is the same thing. So there's really only 10. So that's Rab Ila's explanation of our Mishnah, that there's really only 10 differences between Kodesh and Chulin. It's slightly problematic because these two are not listed together. You would have thought that if these two are the same logic, you would have at least put them together. It doesn't do that. Let the commentaries discuss that. Okay. Rab Chanina bar Papa, Rabbi Ila goes on and he says that Chamish Rishonos, the first 5, Bein LaKodesh, Bein L'chul Shenasu al Taras HaKodesh. Those are the more stricter ones, and they apply whether it's sacrificial food utensils or whether it's utensils for Chulin Shenasu al Taras HaKodesh. That means that a person is using regular mundane food and the utensils for them, but he's keeping it to the level of sanctity of Kodesh. So that would apply, the first 5 distinctions between Kodesh and Truma would apply to both actual Kodesh and for Chulin Shenasu al Taras Kodesh, which is mundane food, which is kept to that level. Achreinas, however, the second 5, so he splits it straight down the middle, because he says there's 10 instead of 11. So you split it 5 and 5. Achreinas is LaKodesh. That's only for actual sacrificial food. But it doesn't apply to chulin that's kept to the level of sanctity of Kodesh. My taima. Why are we making this distinction? The Gemara explains because chamish kamaisa dislu drara de tuma. I don't know how to translate the word drara. Drara. There's a discussion. Tell me the word. Yeah. There's a discussion. Some sort of attachment.
Connection to impurity or something.
Connection sounds good. Yeah. There's a discussion. You remember a discussion about Drara de Mamaina? There's a discussion in Bava Metzia about Drara de Mamaina, and also over there the commentators don't know what it means. Well, they do know what it means, but they each say something else. Concern. Okay, that would follow. I forget over there who says that. Over there it's a machlekes Rashi and Taisus. What I mean. So the first five have an actual concern or a connection to Tuma Midairaisa. So therefore, Gazr B'Rabbanan Bein LaKedesh Bein L'Chulin Shnasu Al Taras HaKedesh. There's more of a real concern. It's not just a decree. Rashi goes through what's going on. He says like this: why are you putting the vessels in the mikveh? You're putting case number one. You're putting the vessels in the mikveh because they're tamei, and you have one vessel inside another vessel. He says, well, that's a real concern because if it's a chatzitza, then the mikveh doesn't help. It's a real concern. So that would apply both to Kodesh and to Chulin Shnasu Al Taras HaKedesh. Then we have another concept. If the back of the vessel becomes tamei but not the inside, he says, well, if it would actually be a real tumah, then the back would be matama the inside as well. It's not like a kli cheres. Here we're dealing with metal utensils or wooden utensils called kli shetef, that the back of it becomes tamei just like the inside becomes tamei. By kli cheres, by pottery, only the inside of the vessel becomes tamei, not the outside. If you touch the outside, it doesn't make it tamei, but by other vessels. So that's a real issue. Then we said if you carry like the shoe, so it makes kodesh tamei as well, but that you're carrying at the same time, but not shumi. He says, well, that's a real concern because maybe it's going to touch. There we have a story. The clothing of someone that eats truma is considered medrash to someone that eats kodesh. It's considered tamei to someone that eats sacrificial food. We said, well, maybe his wife that was in need sat on it. It's a tumah d'oraisa. And what was the fifth one? Kelim anigmarim. That even though it was pure the whole time, but now maybe it became tamei, but it needs to be put into the mikveh to use it for kodesh. So I said maybe there was an amaretz that was involved with it, and he was a zav, and the little spit got on it. So that's an actual concern. So we say that that's a more serious type of concern, and that would apply also to chulin shenasu al taras hakodesh. Okay, the second five are of a different status. They are does the food combine everything that's in it? Does the vessel combine everything that's in it to be so that all the food becomes one? It's just a decree because he only touched part of the food. He didn't touch all the food, and they're separate pieces. So to say that it combines, that's just a rabbinic law, etc. And the rest of them. Okay. I'm sorry, Basraisa. The second case, the second five out of the 10, the less ludrar the tumah midaraisa, that they don't have a connection or a concern of tumah midaraisa. Gazur b'Rabbanan l'kodesh. It was only a decree for kodesh. L'chulin shnasu al taras hakodesh. But for chulin that's kept to that standard, like Gazur b'Rabbanan, we don't make that decree. Okay. Rava argues on Rabbi Ila. Back to the first case of the Mishnah. Vessels inside another vessel. We said that for Kodesh, the mikveh doesn't help. It doesn't work. It's considered according to Rabbi Ila, was a chatzitza. Rava has a different shot. Rava says, Mida seifa mishum chatzitza, reisha la mishum chatzitza. Rava says, not an issue of chatzitza. Vessels inside a vessel doesn't work for another reason. What's the other reason? Reisha hainataima. What's the reason why it doesn't work? Gezerah shalayatbil machdin v'tzinoiris bekeli she'ein bepiv k'shveiferes hanoid. You have a concern like this. If I have two pools of water, each one does not have 40 sa, but they're connected. The pools of water. It's called hashaka. Hashaka means the waters are kissing. the water is going in between like a pipe. I mean, sometimes you will go into a mikveh. If it's a traditional mikveh, not the Chabad mikveh, the hole is on the bottom. It's the same concept, the hole on the bottom. But you look on the side, you see there's a hole there. You stick your arm through. If you're thin enough, you feel cold water on the on the other side. That's called hashaka. It's going to the another bar that has a reservoir, another reservoir of rainwater. Now, the mikveh that you're in is city water, but it's no problem because the water is mixed and it purifies. It all becomes the same. Now, how big does that pipe need to be that connects the two bodies of water? It says it needs to be kishveiferes hanoid, like the opening of a wineskin. The tube of the wineskin, that's the skin of an animal that was used to hold water, wine, or whatever. So, how big is that? We'll see in a moment. Kiditanan, as it says in the Mishnah, Irav mikvais k'shveiferes hanoid, ka'iveh ukechalala. To combine a mikveh, that means that the two pools should be considered attached. That the mikveh should be the right measurement of 40 sa, so that connection needs to be the size of a shveiferes hanoid. Now, which is not only the opening of the noid is the wineskin, but it also needs to be including the thickness of the wineskin itself. No, it's not just to get your fingers inside, we're talking about the thickness of the opening also, the skin. It means that you put in 2 fingers in that hole in the mikveh, and you have to be able to turn back and forth. To turn it around back and forth. That's the size of a shveiferes hanoid. Now, what's our issue? What Rav is telling me is that if you put utensils inside another utensil, but the opening of the larger utensil, the outer utensil, is not shveiferes hanoid, then the water inside, even though the water is going to seep in, but the water inside is not considered attached to the mikveh. So there's a gzeira that you can't put it inside a utensil because the opening might be smaller than a shveiferes hanoid, and then you didn't really put those inner utensils in the mikveh. To remember that is a shveiferes hanoid. It looks to me like an inch and a half, 2 inches. Yeah, it's not a big.
Old jugs used to be like that.
Yeah.
So you can't put utensils inside.
Right. 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 Yeah, you have to also think about that. They would actually be being taival everything. Everything could become tummy, just about, their earrings, their needles, anything that was a vessel or a tachshit for a person, or everything could possibly become tummy. So you would be careful how you would be taival. What would you do? You'd put it inside a larger vessel. So this was a concern that maybe the larger vessel had a small opening. Okay.
Having a small opening is good because it allows the water in.
It allows the water in. The problem is the water that goes in is not considered attached to the mikveh. It's considered always separate. If it's not the size, it has to be a shveiferes hanoid. Yeah, the bigger the better, right? Okay. Yeah, in the Chabad mikveh.
It's interesting because we're saying that the mikvahs of the sea, even though it's connected to this minimum size to a real mikvah, that minimum size qualifies it to a real mikvah.
Right.
Right now we're saying that which is within the mikvah must also have that minimum size, so you have this
To be part of the mikvah, right?
Of the same minimum.
Right.
I think the concept is really interesting.
Right. To be all considered attached. Yeah, in the Chabad mikveh, the floor has that hole, and the explanation was that the different temperatures of water won't mix, and it was assumed that the lower water would be cold, and the upper water would be warm, and that way the original water, the original reservoir of rainwater, which is on the bottom, would be intact over time. Yeah. The Chabad mikveh was challenged on originally by the Divrei Chaim, that he says that there was an issue of on a slope. We said that there was an opinion we learned before that kitah on a slope, the upper one wasn't necessarily attached to the lower one. There was a concern. Remember that we had on depressions on a slope we said that maybe it's not attached, but it's called ketafras, that it wasn't really attached. And the response to that was we considered actually like one mikveh. The whole thing was just one. It wasn't like in a separate location, like this is up here and this is down here. It's one straight on top. Yeah, the other challenge to it was that they actually did a test, and it turns out that the bottom water actually had the minerals that are found in the city water, not in the rainwater. Because if it would really be the rainwater, then you pulled out a cup of that water. Turned out that the minerals were there. And the response to that was that the minerals will drop, but it doesn't mean the water mixed. That was but that's a scientific question. You follow? If I have two separate water, one is like a hard water, soft water, whatever, it doesn't mean the water is mixing just because some minerals have gone from one to another because they were heavier. Go look it up. Okay.
There's a picture of my son-in-law constructed according to all the days.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Pulls on the side, pull on the side, pull on the bottom.
Yeah. So what they do, if in a city mikveh that has also Chabad, what they'll do is they'll do both. They'll put the mikveh, the bar on the side, and they'll put a bar on underneath as well to cover all the. That's what they like to do, to cover all the opinions. Okay.
So the
Shveres Hanayit is the opening.
But in the Quran it says it's like a bag made of wineskin.
Yeah, the opening of that bag is what size? It's the size that two fingers could fit in, and you could turn them back and forth, turn them all the way
you
around.
put like your kalim in there to toilet.
So if it would be less than, you're not being toivel in the vessel. We're saying
small.
you're being toivel in the mikveh.
Mhm.
We have a concern that if you're going to be toivel inside another vessel, that the opening of that vessel may be too small to allow the water to be attached. Well, what is considered too small? If it's smaller than the opening of the wineskin. Now, and because of that, you can't use vessels. You can't put things inside another vessel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what
so
we're
it's
saying.
like pictures are usually like paper or something. So like that,
Right.
you put it in, I think more like, I don't know.
So when the Mishnah said you can't put one thing inside another vessel for Kodesh,
Right.
it was a decree that the opening of the vessel
It's
may
when
be
the
too
opening is
small.
smaller, yeah.
Okay. Savala Kahada Amar Rav Nachman Amar Rabba Baravua. Now Rava that says this pshat and why you can't put a vessel inside another vessel for Kodesh, it's because he follows Rav Nachman that says the name of his father-in-law, Rabba Baravua. Yud Aleph Maila Shanukan. It's not 10 levels. There's actually 11 levels. You see, because Rabbi Ela said that there's only 10 because 2 of them were chatzitza. So we join them together. But here we only have one chatzitza. Which one's the chatzitza? Is the not one. The one with the vessels has to do with a different sort of decree. Sheish Rishainis, and look at how he does it. He says, Sheish Rishainis bein l'kodesh, bein l'chulin shenasu al taras l'kodesh. The first 6 apply to both actual sacrificial food and their utensils. Food never really goes in the mikveh. It's the utensils for those food. And it also applies to chulin, the utensils for chulin, shenasu al taras l'kodesh, that is kept to that level of sanctity. And achreinus, the last 5, is only l'kodesh, avalei l'chulin shenasu al taras l'kodesh, but not for regular mundane food that's kept to that level of sanctity, because those were just decrees, and those decrees don't apply if it's not actual sacrificial food. And the utensils. Ma'ika bein de Rava le de Rabbi Ela. What's the difference between Rava's pshat and Rabbi Ela's pshat? I mean, both of them, you shouldn't use other vessels to hold vessels when you're putting them in the mikveh. And the whole difference was the reason. But what's the practical difference? So ikabenayu sal v'gargusni. The difference would be a basket or a wicker basket. Gusni is like a large basket, a large wicker basket that's used to strain the wine out of the grapes. So there's holes in the wicker basket. Now, shemilan kalim ve'et bilan. If a basket like that was filled with vessels, so it works like this. Lamanda mishum chatzitza. According to Rabbi Ila, it said the issue over here was that the weight of the vessel is going to weigh down on the lower vessel and it's going to interpose. The water won't be able to connect. Now, I know the water is going to get through the wicker, but if it's resting on it, then it's gonna be a layer there where the water's not going to get in between.
Right.
So, according to that opinion, there's a problem. You can't use it. But if the issue is that you may put in needles and little, what's it, sinar? Does it say like forks or something? Little needles and utensils that you're going to put inside another vessel, and there's a concern that that vessel won't have an opening the size of a shriferes hanayid. Well, there's no such thing as a wicker basket that the opening is not kishriferes hanayid. It doesn't have the size of 2 fingers. If it's that type of keli, that type of vessel, it's always going to be acceptable because those are wide. Basically, the opening is the same size as the bottom in vessels like that.
If the opening is smaller than the bottom, but is larger than the 2 finger places,
It could be a decree.
Yeah.
That could be an area where the decree would apply. Here we're saying that the bottom and the top are basically the same. Okay. So that would be a practical difference between Rava and Rabbi Ila if you're using vessels that are large vessels that have large openings. What's the Rava letamei? And Rava follows his reasoning. Dama Rava, because Rava says, Sal v'gargusni shemilan kalim bit bilan tahirin. He actually says clearly that if you take a wicker basket and you fill it up with utensils and you put it into the mikveh, they're all tar. Yeah, maybe that's why you're allowed to use, if we follow Rava. In certain kalim mikveh, they have a basket over there with holes like a laundry basket, the type of baskets that is full of holes. Okay, like a strainer. Mikveh shechalku b'sal v'gargusni. Rava goes on. Let's say there's a mikveh that has a division in the middle of it. I don't know why they would do that. There's a division in the mikveh. There's like a mechitza in the mikveh. So hatayvel sham also like tefillah. If you don't have 40 saw on each side, without a hole, without a shriferes hanayid, we need to have a shriferes hanayid. But even if you had this wicker wall in between, sounds like it's going to go moldy. But let's say it doesn't.
Need to have 40.
You need to have 40 saw on each side. If you don't have 40 saw on each side, it's not going to work. Also like tefillah, it doesn't help. And it says 1 second, but the water is getting through. The water is clearly getting through because it's wicker. It has the holes and all over. The whole thing is holes. It says, well, so what? So is the earth. The earth has hole. It's porous. The earth is porous. The water gets through the earth. You pour a cup of water on the dirt, it seeps in. So the earth is also porous. But nevertheless, but you still need to have a pool of 40 saw. Don't just say that it's attached through the soil to other water. You need to have 40 saw in one place. So too over here.
Has a hole
Oh, the hole means that it's attached. If it's the hole that size, then it's attached.
There's 30 holes.
30 holes don't add up. It needs to be one hole that size. That's what we're saying.
That's smaller than 2 finger.
Yeah. All of those holes smaller, it doesn't work. Bahani Mili, when do we say this? Bekleitar. Yeah, there's 2 ways of learning this. We say that if you put vessels inside another vessel, and then you put that larger vessel in the mikveh, So we say that if the opening is not kishveferes hanoid, then it's a problem. That's only if the outer vessel was pure. Follow, we're getting a leniency now. Aval b'klei tamei, but if the outer vessel was not pure, was impure, migud salka tefil lekulei gufei demana salka lunami lekelim deispe. The fact that the vessel that's being immersed in the mikveh, the outer vessel, was originally tamei, and you're putting it in the mikveh, and it's becoming tar in the mikveh. So if the mikveh helps for that, it also helps for what's inside of it as well.
So we just said that-
Even though the lip is not kishveferes hanoid. Yeah. The outer vessel has inner vessels inside it. Has vessels in the inside, right? The outer vessel. Now, according to Rava, the issue was that the lip, the opening of it, was thinner, possibly thinner than a shveferes hanoid. That's problematic because the water doesn't connect. So that's only an issue if the outer vessel did not need the mikveh anyway. But if the outer vessel needed the mikveh because it was tamei, and you're immersing the outer vessel in the mikveh, then the fact that it helps for the outer vessel, it also purifies the inner vessels while it's at it. Yeah, I guess you can imagine this.
It's like the inner
wicker basket
Kaylee's
is an item
bottle
that's
to
not
the
used for
outer
these.
one.
Wicker vessel.
If you had a bunch of bowls, that would need to be tar, right? That's an example.
Right. If you had a bowl,
If you had a
and
bunch of
even though the
bowls,
bowl in
bowls,
a
no.
wicker basket or in
I'm
a,
saying if you're using the wicker basket,
then you're fine
so-
anyway,
no,
according
so
to
that's-
Rava.
That's an item, okay, fine, we're saying that's an item that doesn't need to be tar-ful, so that would probably cause a chasitza. in
Right.
theory. But
Right.
if you're using a
If it
bunch of
wouldn't be,
bowls,
right.
for example, one inside the other, they
Right.
all need tar-ful, so then
If the outer one is tummy, then
if the other one is tar-ful,
if the outer one is becoming toivel, is becoming tar now, so then it works. Yeah. This concept, a similar concept, is when a woman is converting and she's pregnant. So when she goes to the mikveh helps for her and it also helps for the baby inside. Just as the mikveh helps for her, it helps for the baby inside. And then usually on a conversion mikveh, first is the circumcision and then is the immersion. With this baby, the immersion was done already, and then the circumcision is done as a Jew. Right? 8 days later. Follow? It's good.
very common amongst Israelis to find out.
I had
Very common amongst
I-
Israelis to find out their girlfriend.
I'll tell you the complication that from this Gemara. It's a modern complication. We actually had a shiloh like this. I tried to research it a little bit. Let's say the mother, the birth mother, we'll use the terms, the birth mother is Jewish, and the donor of the egg is not Jewish. So we convert such a child because we don't have real sources in the Gemara, like how to. So the mother's mikveh, let's say the mother wants to go to the mikveh while she's pregnant. The mother's mikveh is not a conversion. The mikveh is not helping for her. She's like a keli that's tar. She doesn't need the mikveh. When the mother was converting, then it helps for the baby. But here the mother's not. You follow the line, the issue.
Which,
No, she's
There's a Jewish mother.
Yeah, she's already Jewish, but the donor.
Yeah, for
is
whatever
not.
reason, she wants a baby from a donor, whatever the story is.
so she doesn't need
Yeah.
conversion, but the baby does.
She's a surrogate.
So the baby will be Jewish?
So it's not gonna. It's gonna work out. It's problematic according to this Gemara. That you can do a conversion after the baby is born. That's no problem. But if she wants to do it before the baby is born, by going to the mikveh, and the baby should be born Jewish, it's not what will not necessarily work because the mikveh is not relevant for her. Like this case.
Daily doesn't need to be tar-ful, that's
You
a
said
chasitza.
the method where they were on the way.
It doesn't. It doesn't help because if it's a conversion, that's after the birth, then first is the circumcision and then is the mikveh. You don't do the mikveh first. I understand, but so you'll have to wait to do the circumcision and then do the mikveh later. That's if it's after the part. Yeah, the doctor's suggesting a water birth.
They don't want to do anything.
Okay. The Tanan, as it was taught in a Mishnah, Kalim, Shemil, and Kalim. If you have a vessel that you filled it up with other vessels, V'hitbilan, and you put them in the mikveh. Harayil Tahirim. It's all tahir. Very good. The case was because you needed to immerse the outer one, and so it works. Ve'imlay taval mayim amuravim adshiyum muravim. The language is very difficult. The Gemara is going to ask, what does this mean? If you didn't immerse it, then the water that's mixed doesn't work until it's mixed. Until it's mixed to the size. Until it's mixed the size of that 2 fingers you would need that in the opening. Gemara says, "My kamar, the imlay taval." What is it saying if you didn't immerse it? What do you mean you didn't immerse it? You're putting the whole thing in. It says, "Hachi kamar, vim einet tzarich lahat bilay." If it wasn't necessary to immerse it, that means because the outer one was pure already, and the vessels inside are the only ones that need the mikveh. So, mayim hamurav machim muravim kishveres anayid. In that instance, then the opening of the outer vessel needs to be the size of a shviferes anayid. The opening of a wineskin, that it needs to be the size of the 2 fingers. Then it's going to work if the outer vessel did not need to be immersed. Okay, let's leave the Gemara here.